The stars shimmered like distant memories across the vast black canvas of space. For the Verilian High Consul, watching the slow rotation of the blue planet known to its inhabitants as Earth was akin to studying an archaeological relic. Not for reverence, but curiosity. It was, by all known metrics, a primitive world. The beings that crawled its surface barely extended beyond their own moon. Their radio emissions, disorganized and riddled with emotional excess, had been dismissed as cultural noise by most advanced species. Yet Consul Threx remained uneasy. Hovering in low orbit aboard the Xantherian, the flagship of the Verilian science fleet, Threx observed Earth with an intensity usually reserved for volatile anomalies. The diplomatic mission, publicly framed as routine, had strict orders: observe, collect samples, and leave undetected. The real motive was less noble. For decades now, certain signals, ancient signals, had resurfaced on fringe colonies far beyond the galactic center. They bore patterns predating any known civilization. The closest match came from a world most aliens considered culturally barren, Earth. Threx turned from the viewport and faced a creature standing in the containment chamber. It looked human, entirely unremarkable at first glance. But Dr. Enla, the Verilian exogeneticist, had run the analysis 3 times. This one's genome carries active sequences we've only ever seen in long-dead ruins on Thraxis Prime and the vaults of KDUL, she said, voice tight with suppressed alarm. We believe them to be extinct. Mythical, even, but they're alive. In these people, the captive human, a man in his late 30s, remained unconscious. He had been taken during a fabricated storm in the outskirts of Bolivia, where an energy reading had led Verilian scouts to a subterranean ruin cloaked beneath a false mountain. Could it be convergent evolution? Threx asked, though even as he spoke, he knew it was foolish. The probability was astronomically low. No, this DNA is a perfect match to archive samples taken from relics believed to be over 5 million cycles old, before a recorded history even began. Enla turned the holopad toward him. It's not just similar, it's identical. Threx felt the icy grip of fear worm into his chest. That could only mean one thing. Humanity wasn't new to the stars. They were old, far older than the Verilians, the Zarkari Dominion, or any known galactic species. The humans weren't ascending. They were returning. The thought was madness. Elsewhere, deep in the amber-lit halls of the Zarkari Council on the planet Kimar, First Speaker Ozan debated fiercely with his aides. Reports from scouting vessels had surfaced that several Outer Rim worlds bore inscriptions now being translated into what could only be described as ancient Terran language, Earth English. That language, until now a linguistic curiosity, appeared on stone-like structures embedded with decaying AI cores. The humans are echoes, Ozan declared, dismissing the warnings. Their technology is barely sufficient to cross their own solar system. We are the lords of this galaxy, not cave-worlders with delusions of grandeur. But even his voice lacked conviction. Among the Zarkari's elite seers, those who interface directly with long-range cognition lattices, a recurring vision had begun to plague them. A black sun rising behind the silhouette of a humanoid figure, arms raised, stars bowing in orbit. It was dismissed as symbolic madness at first. But when 4 seers on different planets reported the exact same dream, on the same galactic cycle, unease spread like plasma fire through the council. Back on Earth, unknown to the Verilians or Zarkari, a man named Kael stood beneath the ruins of an abandoned observatory in Patagonia. He was no one important, a school teacher with fascination for old myths and stars. But he had found something, a door, or perhaps a seal. For weeks, his dreams had been filled with maps he couldn't understand, numbers he had no knowledge of interpreting. He drew them anyway. His friends thought it artistic madness. One night, driven by a compulsion he could neither explain nor resist, he dug beneath the stone floor of the observatory. A panel shifted with a whisper of ancient gears, revealing a cold staircase spiraling into blackness. Kael descended. He did not notice that the stars above him flared unnaturally bright as he vanished into the earth. Back aboard the Xantherian, the human subject stirred. Dr. Enla froze mid-sentence as the man's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly gold. No human should have been able to resist their sedation protocol. No human should have been able to speak Virillian without implants. But he did. "You shouldn't have come here," the man said, voice low and resonant. "We buried what we were for a reason." Threx stepped back, disbelieving. "Who are you?" The man stood, restraints falling away as if repelled by his will alone. He looked up at them with eyes not born of this age. "I don't remember," he admitted, "but I will." In that moment, alarms flared across the ship. Unreadable energy signatures erupted from beneath Earth's surface. Dozens of them. Across the stars, ancient satellites long thought to be natural debris blinked to life, transmitting encrypted data that no current alien system could decipher. Power fluctuations surged in the Virillian fleet. Panic whispered like static. And far away, hidden on the dark side of a moon orbiting a gas giant, something colossal shifted. Humanity, long thought lost of myth and time, was stirring, and the galaxy had no idea what it had awakened. Kael awoke in darkness, though it was not the same kind he had descended into. This place pulsed faintly with a breath-like rhythm. Lights embedded in the walls flickered, as if responding to his heartbeat. The staircase behind him was gone, sealed by seamless stone, and the floor beneath his feet radiated a muted warmth, like metal recalling an ancient sun. He wasn't alone. Shapes move in the gloom. Not beings, but machines, or perhaps constructs. Statues that seemed to sleep in standing poses. They were human in form, but stretched, regal, cloaked in armor too elegant to be modern. As he stepped forward, glyphs lit up under his feet, rippling ahead of him in a path that led to a central dais. Kael didn't understand why he followed it. He only knew that he must. Meanwhile, above the surface, global monitoring networks began to fail. Earth's satellites went blind. Radio telescopes aimed at deep space were returning signals that hadn't been recorded in human history, fractals encoded with layers of harmonic data, spoken not in words, but memories. It wasn't noise. It was a recall code. In Geneva, the United Nations Emergency Science Council convened in frantic secrecy. Governments scrambled to make sense of the inexplicable anomalies, earthquakes that hummed in perfect frequencies, auroras forming impossible geometries, and most alarmingly, the appearance of symbols across deserts and mountain ranges that matched no known civilization. Except one. The same symbols have been found in ancient ruins scattered across planets never touched by man. And then, the dreams began. Unconnected individuals across the world, scientists, artists, children, began sketching the same star maps. Some muttered equations in sleep. Formulas never taught, but eerily precise. A young girl in Lagos built a scale model device she claimed she remembered from before. When questioned, she cried, "They made us forget." Beneath the observatory, Kael stepped into the dais. A column of light enveloped him. Not harsh but weightless, as though lifting his body through memory instead of space. His vision filled with scenes not his own, starships with curved, silver hulls soaring between red suns, humanoid figures seated before thrones not of power, but of stewardship, a galaxy ordered not by war, but by design. And then collapse. He felt it like a scream that never ended, worlds crumbling under the weight of entropy, empires dissolving into dust. The decision was made by minds far greater than his own, to forget, to hide, to regress the species, bury the technology, and let the galaxy think it was new again. But not all things could remain buried. Kael fell to his knees as the vision faded, chest heaving. The air hummed around him, and the construct began to stir, light tracing lines across their forms like waking circuitry. He understood now. He had not discovered this place. He had been brought to it, chosen, perhaps not by merit, but by design laid out millions of years before his birth. His blood was the key, and the lock had now been turned. In orbit, the Xantherian reeled from internal sabotage. The human subject, whose name could not be found in any global database, had vanished, last seen walking into an energy wall and dissipating. Enla was gone too, her lab devastated, and her final message to Threx was short, chilling. "They're not what we thought. They never were." The console stood paralyzed at the command deck, staring down at the Earth. A vast ring of satellites had activated in synchronous orbit, visible now to even primitive human sensors. No known alien technology had triggered them. They had been dormant, waiting for a signal, waiting for Kael. Across the stars, panic bloomed. The Zarkari Confederacy locked down its border worlds. The Mevran Accord demanded explanation from Earth, but human diplomats remained mute or mystified. Only one response came from Earth's side, routed through channels that hadn't been used in millennia. We remember, on the moon, a structure long assumed to be a natural ridge cracked open. Beneath it, layered across kilometers of buried alloy, rose a tower glowing with pulse signatures never recorded in the known universe. A ship, neither entirely mechanical nor organic, detached from its cradle and turned toward the stars. It bore no weapon, no crew, and no known propulsion. It simply moved. Its destination, the galactic core. Kael, now dressed in a suit that molded itself to his skin like liquid metal, walked through the reawakened chamber beneath the earth. Doors hissed open before him. Hallways lit by memories encoded in stone and sound. Every step revealed more what had been hidden. The old symbols, the maps, the languages he never learned but now read fluently. He wasn't alone. Others had begun to arrive, drawn to sites like this across the globe. They, too, had been dreaming. They, too, had started to remember. Humanity wasn't evolving into something greater. They were returning to what they had been before the stars forgot their name. In the chamber's final vault, Kael approached a console shaped like an open hand. Without hesitation, he placed his palm upon it. Stars bloomed in the air above him, forming an impossible model of the galaxy, and then realigned, rotating into a pattern that had not been seen for 1,000,000 years. A low tone reverberated through the earth and out into space. Planets shifted. Systems awakened. The signal was clear. The ancients had come home, and the galaxy had less time than it thought. Aboard the Zarkari dreadnought Vectron, First Speaker Ozen stared in silence at the incoming data feeds. For the last 7 cycles, every deep-range probe dispatched to monitor Earth had vanished within hours. Entire fleets near the Sol sector now returned scrambled telemetry, static mixed with pulses of structured light. Each pulse formed patterns, recursive geometries that matched pre-collapse Eldar records. Records which, until now, had been dismissed as mythologized fragments from an unknown predecessor race. Now that pattern had a source. And a name. Earth. Ozen clenched his mandibles. "What are we looking at?" he asked, his voice clipped, addressing the lead xenolinguist aboard the bridge. "We're not certain," said Sherian, a spindly, translucent-skinned academic who spent years studying extinct languages. Her fingers trembled as she gestured toward the projection. "But this frequency, it's calling the remnants. Devices buried on dead worlds, long thought broken or decorative, are awakening. They're not artifacts, they're receivers." Receivers of what? Orders. The word hung like a blade in the cold air. Elsewhere, Kael moved to the heart of what the ancients once called the core nexus, a buried planetary interface older than civilization itself. His body thrummed with the unfamiliar strength that had emerged since his awakening. It wasn't power as he'd once understood it. It was memory. Every corridor he walked responded to him not through recognition of identity, but acknowledgement of purpose. He was becoming what he had been, and what he had been frightened him. He wasn't alone now. 5 others had joined him in the Nexus. A young physicist from Kyoto, a linguist from Sudan, a blind boy from Sao Paulo who spoke in harmonic sequences, and twins from Siberia who moved as if sharing one mind. None of them understood how they'd been summoned, but all carried within them the same echo, ancestral fragments of knowledge and design. The physicists spoke as they stood before a massive gate deep in the Earth's mantle. The gravity here is artificial. We're not even in our original dimensional layer. This structure exists partially out of phase with known space. Whoever we were, we built this to hide outside of reality. Kael nodded slowly. Not hide. Sleep. The twins touched the gate's glyphs in sequence. With each contact, the metal hissed and retracted, revealing a chamber beyond, a vast spherical vault filled with orbs of suspended light, each containing what looked like a frozen scene. A battle, a city, a memory. They had entered the archive. Kael stepped inside and was immediately pulled into a vision. He stood in a golden field beneath twin suns, watching a version of himself, taller, older, commanding a fleet that orbited above in silence. He issued no spoken orders. He merely thought, and the ships obeyed. Beside him stood beings of every shape and hue, human and otherwise, allies, friends, comrades, and then the skies cracked. A darkness spilled across the stars, not a species of force, chaotic, consuming, senseless. The ancient war had not been for conquest or territory. It had been for survival against entropy made flesh. And when the cause became too great, when entire galaxies dimmed, the ancients made a final decision: to forget themselves, to become less, to bury what they were in bone and blood, until the universe was ready. Kael fell to his knees. The archive faded. He was back in the chamber, the others around him breathing heavily. They had all seen it. This isn't resurrection, Rin whispered. This is restoration. On the Xantherian, Threx was running out of time. The Council had issued a retreat order, but his instincts told him the worst would come not if they stayed, but if they left Earth unmonitored. Endless final message echoed in his mind. They buried what they were for a reason. He turned to his AI. Recalculate the sequence. If humanity is reawakening, then we must assume the galaxy's entire historical framework is flawed. The AI hesitated. Such an assumption implies every ruling species has been living in a post-collapse shadow. Threx nodded. Exactly. The shadow of humans. As the ship's sensors pinged another energy spike from the Earth's surface, a new object entered the system, a monolithic structure, obsidian and starless, drifting silently into orbit. It bore no heat signature, no emissions, but it radiated presence. Back in the Nexus, the blind boy approached Kael. "You're afraid," the child said. Kael looked at him. "Yes." The boy tilted his head. "Of who you were?" "No," Kael replied. "Of what we did, and what we might do again." They had not simply built civilizations. They had commanded the balance of galactic forces, tamed black holes, altered planetary lifespans. But such power had not made them gods. It had made them responsible. Now, as the rest of the galaxy began to mobilize, either in fear or in preparation for war, Kael and the others faced the truth of their legacy. Not dominance, but accountability. Whatever force had once threatened the stars might still be out there. And this time, the ancients would not go back to sleep. The stars pulsed with warning. Kael stood at the helm of the awakened Nexus core, now elevated through Earth's crust and hovering silently in the upper stratosphere. What had once been mistaken for a mountain range was now a vessel older than memory, responding to commands without hesitation, yet not entirely under his control. Around him, the other awakened, Run, the linguist Hannah, the twins Ilya and Vec, and the blind boy Nico, each occupied nodes of the ship's ancient nervous system. They were not a crew, not yet. They were remainders of an extinct age, children of a civilization that had rewritten itself into myth. And now they had returned not to conquer, but to confront what had once undone them. The darkness was returning. High above, the object that had drifted into soul orbit, silent, unmarked, was no longer passive. It had begun to unfold. The structure's petals unfurled like an obsidian bloom, revealing a lattice of shifting segments surrounding a cold singularity at its heart. It was not a weapon. It was a gate, and something was on the other side, on the Xantherian. Consul Threx initiated an override, silencing the Virilian High Command. There was no time for protocol. Endless final words echoed too loudly, and now, with the gate blooming in real space, every instinct he'd honed through centuries of exploration screamed in unison. He ordered the ship to hold position, even as smaller scout vessels retreated toward the outer system. "We never asked what made the ancients run," Threx murmured. "No one ever does," came a voice from the side. He turned. The human, the one who had disappeared, was standing beside him again, unarmed, unafraid. "I remember now," the man said, voice low and steady. "We sealed in the dark between galaxies, trapped beyond space-time with keys only our kind could forge. We hoped that would be the end." Threx swallowed. "But it wasn't." The man shook his head. "Entropy doesn't sleep. It waits." Below on Earth, seismic activity erupted, not from tectonic stress, but from internal realignment. Subterranean machines long dormant emerged from deep within the planet's mantle, reforming crust, rerouting geothermal conduits. Cities of stone and code rose in remote wilderness, displacing nothing, interfering with no life. The planet wasn't being prepared. It was remembering its shape. Kael looked through the viewing prism, staring at the gate. He didn't need instruments to understand its function. It was not merely opening. It was listening. Somewhere beyond it, in the interstellar dark where light bends and time forgets itself, the force that had once driven their kind to erase themselves was stirring. "I think it knows we're awake," Rin said. "Then it remembers us too," Ilya whispered. The archive had shown them glimpses, what the ancients had called the silence, a vast, consuming intelligence not born of hatred or desire, but decay. It had no will to conquer. It merely unwound. Planets reduced to quantum dust. Stars extinguished not by force, but by being overwritten. It was not malevolent. It was inevitable. And once, humanity had stood in its path. Kael stepped forward, placing his hand against the interface. The ship pulsed with light, humming as the Nexus extended tendrils of data into the gate's perimeter, trying to slow its activation. It wasn't enough. "We can't fight it as we are," Hannah said. "We've only just begun to recover." "We're not meant to fight alone," Kael replied. He turned toward the others. "We didn't just bury our memories. We buried our alliances." Coordinates flashed across the ship's memory. Hidden vaults not on Earth, but scattered across the stars. Sanctuaries built with other ancient species now long thought extinct. Allies that might still sleep, if not already consumed. Nico stepped forward. "Then we go wake them." Outside, the gate completed its charge. A ripple moved through space, a soundless scream that bent starlight, pushed aside comets, and made every sentient being in the system pause without knowing why. Something vast was reaching through. The Nexus responded. With a surge of propulsion that did not obey physics as understood by modern minds, the ancient vessel folded space around itself and disappeared, leaving behind only spiraling afterimages. Across the galaxy, in the deep archives of the Zarkari Council, alarms blared. Words buried in prophecy lit up across consoles. When the gate stirs and Earth remembers, the time of reckoning begins. And in the far distance, beyond charted systems, in a dark space where time ran thin and reality flickered, something opened an eye that was not an eye. It felt the presence of those who had once dared defy it. It remembered, and it began to move,